Hello. So I'm going to do some more work on the journal today, but I have to give you a bit of a disclaimer for this particular video sorry, I'm just trying to move my microphone. It's messy. I've had a bit of an accident and this is partially to blame, and I'll explain that when we get to it. I'm going to talk to you today about inks, and we're going to do some ink work and hopefully a bit of watercolor. I'll show you some of the stuff that I've already done. I have filmed one video which it didn't go wrong as such, but the technology went wrong, so I don't think we've caught everything. I'm doing it again so I can hopefully cut and splice two videos together. So inks, I absolutely love working with inks, and I always work with black actually. You can do the same thing with other materials. So a lot of you know I taught art. I taught lots of art, lots and lots of different types of art. I taught A-level photography, I taught BTEC art and design, and basically I am what I would call a jack of all arts and a master of none. So I'm here to tell you I'm not an expert, but I can pass on some techniques to help you to maybe create better work than I can. That's my goal. And I'm going to talk to you about 3 different types of ink today. Now, I have a calligraphy ink. I have an Indian ink, not as much as I had before I started the video today. I've washed and washed this, but it's a cross between this Indian ink and Quinn, and that's the 3rd ink that I'm going to talk about. This is Quinn, and it was in a beautiful little vintage ink pot which now has a crack at the bottom. So I'm hoping we can use that ink before it all disappears. It's only a small crack. Calligraphy ink and Indian ink are not designed to go into fountain pens because they will become, most of them, will become permanent when they dry. Indian ink pretty much will not move with water once it's completely dry. The calligraphy ink, I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't move much. This is an example. I won't show you too much of that because we're going to do another one of those, but it won't move much when it's dry. Quinn is a very different ink. This is a Parker. So it's designed to go into a calligraphy pen. It's water soluble. It's not permanent unless it's sealed, and it will move with water and other wet mediums. Now, I'm basically using my palette knives, and I have, this is messy as it is, I have calligraphy ink, I think, calligraphy ink in this. Now, I want to show you the difference between these 2 inks, and I hope you can see the difference. So this one is calligraphy ink. I'm not going to put the top back on that, and I'm just going to move that. Okay. And this is the Indian ink, which is absolutely permanent once it's dry. Okay, so I've got some on my palette knife, and I'm going to move that. They look very similar, probably on camera, but the one thing I would say is this particular brand of Indian ink, this particular brand, which I actually picked up from Landham Gallery, which is a local art store. So I don't know where you get it from other than a local store. This is more grey in my eyes. The calligraphy ink is black, and it's much deeper and richer. The Indian ink, which is permanent, is not so rich. So I'm going to use the calligraphy ink, but there might be some movement. And like I said, the Quinn, which is your standard kind of ink for fountain pens is going to move. So I'm just going to show you a few techniques again. I'm sorry, I hope I don't forget anything. So I love to do three things actually. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my superfine drop bottle, and I'm going to put some drops on my page, and there is hardly any ink there at all. Now, it hasn't happened on this particular sheet, but if you get, I'm going to tell you that afterwards actually. I'm going to take my palette knife and I'm just going to rub my palette knife through my ink, and you get some fantastic kind of images. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some more drops in, okay, and this time I'm going to go in the opposite direction to give that a little bit more interest. So that's two ways of using this ink. Now I'm going to take a little pot and I'm actually going to squeeze a little bit in to the pot, just a tiny bit, I say. That's actually more of a bit than I thought. And the other thing I like to do is, I haven't used the right pot, is just create some lines and cross them. This is just how I love to use my inks. Now you can use some really unusual tools for mark making with inks. You could use your feathers, you could use sticks, you can use toy cars. I used to do that with the students, they love it. So you can run your toy car with the tire prints through, and you can then you know, roll that across your page and get some really interesting patterns. You can use anything that you would use for printing, bubble wrap, things like that, but you do need to be careful with cleaning. Okay, so that's one kind of technique. Now these are just backgrounds, but what I want to do is I want to do another line, and I just want to pull a bit more down here, and you can see how little time you have to use this particular ink. Okay. Because it does dry. Okay, so the other thing is if I just drop a little bit here, so, and you can have lines going in some different directions. Just play with the inks. They are so much fun. Okay, so that's one background. That's that one done. And in the previous video, I did something very similar and created that. So, you know, lots and lots of options, and you never really know what you're going to get when you use an inks. So the other thing that is a lot of fun, and this is going to take you back to your childhood, and that's, I'm going to do a scribble. Okay, and this is where you might get a bubble. The best way to get rid of it is not blot it, but make a kind of point on a tissue, and you'll notice that it pops and it lifts up the majority of that ink. Now I'm going to take my palette knife again, and I'm going to go through that. I mean, how interesting is that already? You know, it's a very simple technique. And you can, the heavier the ink, the more run you'll get. The lighter the ink, the less run you'll get. And I'll show you one that I've done after using that technique. And the third thing I love to do, I'm going to grab my tiny little palette knife now, and that's gonna, I'm just gonna, now you don't want to do too much at a time, because like I said, this does dry. I'm going to make some circles. You don't have to have a palette knife. You can use the end of a pencil or a paintbrush. You could use a bone folder. Okay, so that's another one. The other thing you can do is make some circles, and in a similar way we did the other, you can drag them. And then add some interest again with some lines. You can absolutely print with these inks. It is a little bit messy, I'm not going to lie, but again, that's kind of interesting to as a background, interesting to start working on too. So I'm just trying to remember what I did in the last video. So the Quinn, okay, this is water soluble, and I'm going to struggle a little bit because I've had to put my pot in here, and I can see it's still slowly seeping out, but I'm going to dip my tool and do the same thing. So we're going to make some circles, and you can already see as I put this down on the page, it's much more blue than the other inks. I want to show you is I'm going to take my brush, I'm just going to hold this up slightly so you can see. I'm not sure if you can see, but in certain areas you can see it's much more blue than the calligraphy ink. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just wetting my brush, and I'm going to show you what kind of effects you can get with the Quinn ink. You don't need it really wet. It will move so beautifully, but you are going to start seeing a lot more colour coming through. It's going to depend on the ink. In this particular ink, you'll see a lot of blue and sometimes a little bit of brown. But this does give you... this is just watercolour. No, this is sketchbook paper. We're going to do watercolour in a minute. And again, these are for my backgrounds. I'm just going to kind of wash this one a bit more heavily, so hopefully we'll see some of those additional colours coming through. I can start to see some brown coming through there. These backgrounds are going to be used for things like adding to make tags. I'm just going to drop a little bit more water. You can definitely see the blue coming through here, and there is a little bit of brown coming through here. So if I hold it up, you can see obviously very blue over here, starting to see some brown as well in there, and if you can see, I don't know if that's showing up very well, but there is some brown starting to come through on that particular circle there. Okay, so that is the Quinn ink. So you can do some quite interesting things with it. But isn't that just beautiful? Obviously not the work, but the just the effects and the colour. I mean, look at the blues coming through here now. I just love it. I just absolutely love it. We're going to do this in a couple of ways. I'm going to grab, this is £140 watercolour paper. It's not a fan. Just going to show you that actually. That's some of the Quinn ink that I did in the previous video, and you can see those colours. I mean, you've got yellows in here as well. I know it's a yellow paper, but that's just beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my calligraphy ink. So exactly the same, exactly that. So what I did with this one is I just mixed some greens and I just coloured them, so that I might actually go in and colour the background too, so we can use it for some tags, maybe use it as a page. I don't know yet. We're just creating elements to go into the journal. So what I did was, this is going to look very different because this ink is not dry. So it's probably not the best time, but this is the palette of greens that I made up, although some of them I completely used. So I'm just going to one is very different, but it doesn't mean it's worse, it just means it's very different. So that's the one I did earlier with the ink dry, and this is the one with the ink slightly wet, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. In actual fact, this one doesn't kind of, it's not matchy now, so I'm going to bring in some of that wet ink and go back in where it's still wet, get some of that ink. There we go. Okay, so that's that. And if you remember this one, we did. I did exactly the same thing with the watercolor. I think that's it. I think that's it for ink and watercolor. Oh, I did one other that I will just quickly show you if it's anywhere close at hand, because these are some of the other ones that I've done. And this one, same principle. If you don't have watercolors, this one I've just gone in with pastels. And just blended them, so you know, you can use those as well. You can. Thank you for joining me. Take care, stay safe. I will see you soon. Bye.